The reason why you're struggling to maintain changes that you've worked so hard to implement is because you haven't yet shifted your identity. In order to create a new experience for yourself, you have to do more than just change a habit. And what do we mean when we say change a habit? What is a habit? It's something we do without thinking about it, right? So let's say, for example, you want to lose weight and be healthier. You want to be thinner, you want to be fitter, you want to be more energetic. And so you decide to commit to 75 hard, or you decide, hey, I'm going to push myself to work out every week. I'm going to just go hard. I'm going to force this change. And when you're thinking of when you say I am going to, you're imagining yourself as the overweight, undisciplined, sugar craving person that you believe yourself to be in that moment. Well, what it really takes is for you to begin to identify as that energetic, disciplined person who loves to work out. Otherwise, you can do 75 hard. I'll never ever do 75 hard. It really goes against how I believe, any change should be made. I don't think any change should be forced. I think every single change we make has to occur through an identity shift. And the truth is that we're shifting identities in every single moment. So I talk a lot in some of my other videos about how time actually works. That time is something that we are only perceiving in the fourth dimension. And once you get outside the fourth dimension, everything has already happened. Every single potentiality already exists. And when we're in this 4D experience, perceiving time, the only thing that actually exists is the present moment. And our identity, who we believe ourselves to be, is held together by how we perceive our past, because we're not experiencing the past, right? We're only experiencing the present, and how we perceive our potential future. All of that determines what we believe about the now and who we believe that we are. And so when we try to force ourselves into a new reality without understanding how the ego is held together, without understanding that we can change how we identify, we're constantly manifesting our past and manifesting our future, then we snap right back into the previous state. So if you believe yourself to be a person who loves sweets, a person who hates working out, a person who can't ever keep the weight off, then even if you do whatever program you choose to do and you lose 100 pounds, you're going to gain all that weight back, because as soon as you run into a snag, or as soon as you need comforting, you need something that makes you feel grounded, the person you identify as is who you're going to snap back to. So you could have lost that 100 pounds, but in a moment where things feel shaky or you're unsure, you're going to snap back to who you really believe you are and eat the tub of ice cream or eat the burger and fries, because that's who you really believe that you are, based on how you are remembering, reassembling your memories of your past and imagining your future. So until that identity shift is complete, you won't see lasting change in your reality, no matter how hard you try. And that's why you see phenomena like when people win the lottery and they lose it all within a couple of years, because they don't identify as a wealthy person. They identify as a poor person who won the lottery. So if you don't understand how this works, you can get stuck on a single timeline. You can get stuck because you keep remembering the same past. You keep remembering, the version of you, or interpreting events in your past the same way, and you keep projecting out the same future. So it doesn't matter what happens to you in the present moment. You stay on the same timeline because you, by the way you're perceiving the past and the future, are creating that timeline at all times. You are always able to shift timelines. And the only way to shift timelines is not only to imagine a different future for yourself, but also imagine a different past. And this is really trippy for a lot of people. It's a really difficult concept for a lot of us to grasp, but your past doesn't exist. Only how you remember and interpret it exists. And I use the word exist loosely because even if you imagine the same exact events from your past, the way that you interpret the meaning of those events can change who you are in this present moment. So you don't have to do the 75 hard. What you do have to do is identify as a person who is health conscious, a person who is thin, a person who eats to live and doesn't live to eat. You have to identify as that person. I know I'm against cleanses unless you're like very, very ill. And when I say cleanses, I'm talking about like the juice fast and things like that, especially if you haven't shifted your identity. Because you're going to do all that work, put yourself through HE double hockey sticks. I don't know how much you can say here on YouTube. And then if you still identify as a junk food eater, then you're going to go right back to what you were doing before. That's not to say that, it doesn't accumulate over a period of time. Like, it's better to have done the cleanses than not do the cleanses. But I personally refuse to put myself through all of that if I'm still identifying as the same person. So the work that I do to change is shifting my identity first, and then the activities come naturally. For example, I I do okay financially. I'll put it that way. But I am playing around with the idea of extreme wealth, right? I don't believe I need extreme wealth at this point. It's just something that I want to see if I can manifest. I'm trying out some things. And the way I'm shifting my identity around that is I'm making myself into someone who really understands how money works, large sums of money. I'm making myself into someone who understands how I would set up millions of dollars in assets. Now, if I'm making $60,000 a year, these are not things that I have to concern myself with, right? I'm going to just be probably living paycheck to paycheck in this economy. So all I have to worry about is, the bank that's closest to me that I can drive to or that's the most convenient, and cutting coupons and maybe having a little budget tool. But if I'm in the millions of dollars, money is only insured, FDIC insured, up to $250,000 in a single bank. So what do people do when they have more than that in the bank? That's a question I would need to know the answer to if I identify as a person who experiences extreme financial abundance. And when I say extreme, that's a sign that I haven't changed my identity, because to a person that already has it, it is not extreme. It's the norm. So that's another key to shifting your identity, is to not see the new reality as something that's so far out there, because you're kind of holding it apart from yourself. Every single time that I've been able to have a quote unquote big manifestation, the work that I've done leading up to that has made it feel very normal. And ways that I've done that in the past is just to imagine that the thing is already there for so long that it feels weird not to imagine it is already there. So I'm identifying as the person who has the thing, and then the thing comes. It has to, because I have changed my past and future, right? I have said to myself that in my past, I already got this thing. And then in my future, I will also have this thing. And then my identity is held together by how I'm perceiving my past and how I'm perceiving my future. And that's how things come into my life. I can't view them as extreme or out of the ordinary. And in some cases, even when I've had the mentality that something is like a big manifestation, it'll come in, but it won't stay, because I haven't created a container large enough for it in my identity. Another way that I am changing my identity to be someone who has extreme wealth is I'm thinking about what I do with that extreme wealth, where my money goes, what kinds of things I spend money on a regular basis, what kind of new expenses I have as a person of extreme wealth, whether that be donating, purchasing different types of assets. I need to understand how those assets work. And I get very comfortable with the idea that I have access to these things, and the wealth comes after that. So what I've done in the past that has not worked, because I have made significant leaps in abundance. But what I've tried in the past that didn't work was still identifying as someone who had a ceiling financially, but doing all this research on owning a business, creating a business, running a business, but still identifying as this person that can only make so much money. So even when I would launch a side business, I do have some additional streams of income, the money would just trickle in, right? It didn't take me above that ceiling that I had created in my subconscious for how much money I could make. And my ideas were very subconscious, meaning I wasn't aware that I had a ceiling. But then when I stopped to think about it, I was like, okay, I'm basing my financial ceiling on the salaries that I've been exposed to. I remember having a coworker many years ago. This is probably like a decade ago. And at that time, I think I was making less than six figures. I can't remember. But I remember this coworker casually mentioning that he was making almost $400 an hour. And I had never heard that number before. And at first I thought he was joking. And so I'm looking at him, tell me whatever story he was telling me. And he just casually kept talking. And I'm sure he didn't realize what that moment did for me. It just like blew my mind as far as what's possible. And just thinking about past experiences, I remember when my mind was opened up like that. Another example was I used to listen to a podcaster that would share his monthly income. And he was sharing six-figure numbers per month. And I had never been exposed to that. And I was just very receptive to it. Once I heard that someone else was doing it, I was like, oh, it can be done, which means that I have access to it. But I remember having a conversation with someone about the podcast in particular and saying, man, can you believe that people are out here making, six figures every single month? And that person, without hesitation, like I could barely get the sentence out, said, they're lying. They're not doing that. So sometimes part of what holds us back is a lack of receptivity, even when we are exposed to larger containers for things, right? And I see that now when it comes to love and relationships. Like there are people out here just gushing over their spouse. And there are people with such negative views. It's really fear-based because they think that if they open themselves up to the idea that they could have something that they see as so extreme, they're putting themselves in some sort of danger subconsciously. Anything we reject is because we believe it's going to harm us in some way. Even if it's not logical, it doesn't have to be logical. We are not logical creatures. If we were, things would be pretty boring and our souls wouldn't be able to go on the journeys that they go on. But part of what holds us back sometimes is the inability to expand our container, to when we are exposed to something that we see as unattainable, immediately rejecting it energetically. So one easy way to just expand possibilities for yourself is to just be open to things that may seem outlandish to other people or abnormal to the people that you're around. Because what I've found happens is that as I allow myself to expand my container, expand the realm of what's possible in my own imagination, my day-to-day experience changes completely. And I'm living a completely different life. Like I'm exposed to completely different things day after day after day than some of the other people that I've associated with in my past. And sometimes it gets to a point where I'm not even comfortable talking about certain things around certain people because our realities are so different at this point because I've allowed myself to expand my container for receiving from the universe, for being able to truly shift identities. I mean, that's essentially what I've been doing my entire life, is continuing to evolve by shifting who I believe I am, reinterpreting, revisioning my past. They call it revision. There's a technique, a manifestation technique all over the internet called revision, and expanding what I think is possible. And when it comes to looking at my future, right, looking ahead, I no longer even try to conceptualize it. So I've gotten to a point where I don't even want a container around what I think can come in my future, because then I limit the universe. So I do a lot of work revising how I interpret things that have happened on my previous timeline. And then when it comes to anticipation of what's to come, I leave it wide open. I focus on regulating my nervous system. I focus on being open to new information, to new experiences, because then there are no limits to what the universe can bring me. And so it's really important, if there's something, an area where you feel really stuck, think about who or how you're seeing yourself, what you believe your identity is in that area. And I think a way to do that is to stop and say, and just let the words come out. And then without a filter. And that'll give you an idea of how you're perceiving yourself around the thing. So, for example, if I'm thinking about money again, I would say, I am generous. I am, I don't have to think about how much something costs ever. And those things are true for me now. They weren't always true for me. But think about what comes out of your mouth naturally when you talk about something. And if you find that what comes out is contrary to what it is that you're trying to experience, it means you haven't done the identity shift. And 9 times out of 10, it's because of how you're perceiving things that you've already been exposed to on your timeline, like in your past. And there may need to be some reframing. You may have received messages, at a young age that you internalized to try and keep you safe. Whoever gave you the messages or however you interpreted the messages was intended to keep you safe from something that you perceived as unsafe. But now it's time to re-examine that. Now you're in a different position. Now you can take another look and question those deeply held beliefs, assumptions, paradigms that you hold. And I have another video called Manifestation is about removing things, not about techniques. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's about removing the boundaries around what you believe is possible, who you believe you can be. Because, to some degree, it's necessary to have a particular identity for this soul's journey, and also to avoid becoming ungrounded in reality. And you see this with people with multiple personality disorder. They're totally their ego self is fragmented, and they're not able to really function properly in this reality. But there does need to be flexibility in how you see yourself and who you believe yourself to be, if you want to experience major breakthroughs, major level ups in your life, major new experiences. You do have to open yourself up to the possibility that you can change your identity, that you're not that person that has a sweet tooth. What is a sweet tooth? That's not even a thing, but a lot of us identify as someone with a sweet tooth. Or, I identify as someone who loves exercise, and I truly love every second that I spend in the gym. And there was a time when I didn't go to the gym at all. There was a time when I couldn't even lift the empty bar, off of the barbell rack. So, allow yourself to expand your ideas about the possibilities of who you can be and what you can experience. And sometimes at first, like until you do your identity shift, you may need to isolate. That's why people talk about isolating so much. And maybe you don't need to isolate from everyone, but you may need to isolate, if you're trying to increase your abundance, you need to isolate from that group of people that you're around that constantly talk about being broke, that steal, because they feel like they can't get access to certain things without being deceptive, or people that just, make you feel like abundance isn't a thing, financial abundance isn't a thing. And if you're looking to experience a loving relationship, you may need to isolate until you're strong in your identity from people that have negative things to say about relationships. And I've found over time that once I'm truly embodying the new identity, like now I truly embody the identity of someone who is financially abundant and someone who is fit and healthy. Now it's easier for me to be in environments that show me something different, if that makes sense. Like, I can be around people who don't like to work out on a regular basis, and I'm still going to the gym because now I'm solid. I've embodied that new identity. I can be around people that make jokes about being broke because now I am solidly grounded in my identity as a person who is abundant. So, a lot of what we see, like on social media and stuff, of people talking about, you know, cutting people off because the five people around you determine who you become, all those things where people are kind of isolating themselves. I think that comes from not being grounded in the identity that they're seeking. And there's nothing wrong with temporarily isolating until you get grounded, but don't isolate and then not do the identity work, because then all you're doing is setting up walls to protect yourself from things you fear. You're not really changing yourself so that you can go back beyond those walls and reintegrate yourself with your community and with society. Um, all of this work that we do on ourselves is intended to impact the collective, right? That is my belief. You can agree or disagree. But I believe community is such an important part of just being a human. And so when we isolate, when we withdraw to work on ourselves, we should get to a place of maturity and groundedness in who we are, to where every little thing doesn't trigger us. Every little thing doesn't, ignite fear in us or make us feel unstable. So I feel like that's when you've truly made an identity shift, and whatever it is that you're trying to change about your experience is there to stay. And it's not going to be a temporary thing because you have completely transformed your identity. If you want more content on exactly how to do identity shifts in different areas, leave a comment below. Tell me what you think about what you heard today and whether or not you picked up on anything that you're going to start doing in order to experience the reality that you desire.